This is the Stage Time podcast with Travis Valle. I'm your host, and today I'll be speaking with Chris Womack. Say hi, Chris.
Hey, Travis. Thanks for having me on, man.
No problem. Chris is a local comedian in Harrisonburg. He is also part of X2 Comedy, which will be coming out with a new name soon, the Funny Womacks with Friends and Friends.
Yes.
Donald, hit me later for getting that wrong. Fluff. There you go. Just remember Fluff.
Right.
He's been doing shows. He's going to be on one of my shows coming up soon.
Yeah, looking forward
and we're going to talk to him today about his experiences in comedy. So, Chris, how you doing? You want to?
I'm doing great, man.
Say anything about yourself before we get into it?
I am Chris. I live here in the Harrisonburg area, same as you. Been doing comedy about 3 years now. If I recall, I met you at the Brothers open mic back when Chris Cantrell was running it, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
So before I hosted the open mic that I do now, there was another guy who hosted it, and it went away for a while, partially because he moved, partially because of COVID. And before that happened, I visited once or twice, and I think that's when I met you for the first time.
And you got a funny joke about taking his job.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't done that as much lately. I think that's one of those things where I've said it so many times because it was an introductory joke that I kind of got tired of it. Like every open mic I would do it, and then it's like, this has grown kind of old now. I don't know if I like this anymore. So what got you interested in stand-up comedy?
I was interested in stand-up comedy even when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
There was just something about it. I'm a older guy, since your listeners can't see me. I'm 57. So back in the day, had actual albums, vinyl.
You don't look a day over 56.
Oh, thank you. And there was also there was no comedy. There was no, Netflix comedy specials. There was nothing. So you would listen to comedians. You would buy their record.
You're just giving us a whole back in my day thing.
Yeah. and that was my long story short. I was one of these guys that had as many comedy albums as I did rock records. We
didn't even know half these people were black. My God, people heard.
Exactly. Oh, son of a gun. And so I just loved it. I would listen to that stuff over and over. I would listen to Richard Pryor over and over. I would listen to Eddie Murphy, Robin Williams, over and over and over and over. And so I just always loved it, and just always a huge comedy fan. Mm-hmm. And then my wife got into stand-up comedy.
Don Womack, who is on another episode of the show. Yeah. I don't know if it's before or after, but we'll decide that later.
Yeah. So this might be repetitive, might not. So she got into it, and as she got into it, I would go to all of her shows, but I would sometimes I'd go to open mics with her as well.
Was that begrudging, or was it?
Yeah, open mics was begrudging.
Open mics were begrudging.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was begrudging. But there were, I can't even count how many open mics I'd be 2 beers in and being a huge comedy fan. And because I was a huge comedy fan, I always had certain potential jokes in the back of my head, stuff like that, not non-written bits. And
just deconstructing and critiquing everybody who goes up on stage.
Kinda, but also feeling like an ass because they're up there, But so the aforementioned Chris Cantrell, we got to know him, and 2 or 3 beers in, I'd always be like, Chris, I'm going to go up sometime, and he'd be like, hey man, I want you to do it. So both him and Dawn were like, when are you going to do it? You keep talking as if you're going to do this, and then you never do. Yeah.
By the way, I just want to take a quick note because Chris Cantrell might be going by a different name and identity. I don't know what the circumstances are.
Oh, yeah. Apologies if that's right.
If he happens to hear this,
we're just
going with what we knew at the time.
Exactly.
So anyway, he and Dawn have been pressuring you to get on stage, and you've been critiquing these comedians and thinking you can do it better.
I just thinking it would be fun to go up there and finally do it, right?
Yeah.
And then about 3 years ago, I was making some very necessary, positive changes in my life. right? Doing a lot of things, including therapy and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so we were sitting outside on our deck one really nice May afternoon and on a Sunday.
Nice.
And we were just like sipping some wine. And I knew Dawn had a open mic coming up at Brothers, you know, and I said, hey, would you help me get 5 minutes together for the mic? And she said, yeah, but I don't think you're going to do it. Because she did have that little baby. And so she helped me. You know, I had some stuff that I had already just thought about from years and years of just thinking about things, you know. And so we got something together. I don't even really remember constructing that too much. I just remember I got the bits together and she helped me kind of solidify them and punch them up. And then we went, and Dawn told me later as we were walking up to the entrance of Brothers, she still didn't believe I was going to do it.
Just thought you were going to chicken out, or
yeah,
okay.
yeah. She thought I was going to be like, no. And then we surprised the hell out of Chris. You know, he was like, you are? And I was like, yeah, here we go. And so did it and had the time of my life.
What can you describe about that night? So some things like, what was the crowd like? Obviously, Dawn was there, but did you have any other family or friends out? Like, what is it? Paint us a picture of your first time
I had
on comedy.
So first of all, if I do say so myself, pretty decent beginner set put together. But I mean, not awesome by any stretch. Nobody's beginner set is awesome, right?
Yeah.
But
I mean, you had some advantages with you too. You had, you know, the wisdom of your wife and the many experiences of seeing what works and what didn't work.
Yeah, I had a lot going for me. So these bits, I literally had somebody who was a comedy producer helping me punch up those bits to make a good 5. Then you add in, it was just one of these nights at Brothers where it was outdoors that night. I think you remember when they do it sometimes outdoors. But it was packed. Like the crowd was just there. It was a hot crowd, which is and it was unlike a lot of open mics. It was not a kind of, you know, crowd where it's like, crap, I just wanted to have a few beers and now I got all these idiots telling jokes. You know, it was like, let's go. We're here for the comedy. Where is it?
That's always good too.
It was incredible. Was Kyle there? Kyle might have been there that night. If he wasn't, but anyway, I might
have been there. You're starting to sound very familiar.
Also, Dawn, you know, because Chris was not coming up in between comics and introducing. We were piggybacking. And so instead of just the usual, you know, okay, give it up for Chris Womack.
Yeah.
She gave me this like paid show intro.
She was the one right before you?
Yes.
Okay,
and so she stacked the deck for me. And also, I
might have done the other thing. Just be like, yeah, this is his first time. You know, go easy on him. Just like get the crowd ready for disappointment. You don't want to overhype and undersell. But
they did know it was my first time. She did say that. And that always helps, as you know, right? But that helps. The crowd immediately kind of turns. I didn't realize that then. So the crowd had that sort of like, let's support this guy.
Yeah.
It was A, a hot crowd. B, it's a let's support this guy moment. And so it just, like, I felt like I just murdered, right? You know, I felt like that. And then, you know, got a lot of people like dapping me up afterwards. And I remember John Rademacher was going right after me.
Another very funny comedian.
That was the first time I ever met John. And
I might have been there that night, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he came up after me and he was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to tell people about when I went after this middle-aged professor and he straight up murdered, you know, and he like led off with that. And I was like, oh my gosh.
He's a very young guy.
And he's a funny comic, and, you know, and Dawn and some other people had even told me like that guy, you know, is really good. So I'm like,
you don't want to go after him. It's good he went before.
Yeah, exactly. But they, you know, I was like, oh my gosh, this guy that they're saying is funny is, you know, propping me up kind of thing. So I was just walking 5 feet off the ground. So it was great. Looking back, it wasn't as good as I thought it was. But but I
had rose-colored glasses.
Exactly.
Right. That reminds me of a time where when I was doing a music open mic, I'd done open mics quite a bit. I was pretty much a regular. But I remember I was going to try out a new song that I hadn't done on stage before, and I ended up going kind of later on the list. It was like second to last, or it might have been last. And the guy right before me, he was this very energetic dude. He did this awesome guitar cover of No Diggity. You know that song? Yeah. Like, he started doing it, the whole crowd singing along and stuff. And then I have to be the one who goes after him. And I was like, well, this is disappointing. And then I was just terrible. I felt so bad. Man. I was like, I had all this energy, but it was a new thing that I wasn't fully prepared with. And so, I mean, who goes before you at an open mic can also definitely affect how your performance goes. Yeah.
And like I said, I had a stacked deck because Dawn was going before me. And she, if I recall, she had a pretty good set. And the, like I said, hot crowd. And then she's like, "Hey, first time, give it up," you know. And so, looking back, I appreciate it even more.
Do you remember any of your jokes from that set?
I remember a few. I opened with the fact that I was a comedy virgin, so be gentle with me. And then I realized later I had subconsciously stole that from Dawn.
Like already stealing jokes. First set. Just go up to a great start. Copyright.
I didn't know I was, but then actually there was a few in there that I still do today. I did a lot on drinking, which was good because it was at a brewery. But,
and you're an alcoholic.
Yeah, that's right. I think I had the beginnings of, if you remember, like my drinking rhymes bit.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I had a bit about, how the drinking rhymes are probably not a good way to instruct drunk people. And it wasn't.
If it rhymes, it makes sense.
I don't think it was in its present form, but I had something on that, and I had something about how, say that you're overserved instead of that you got drunk because it sounds classier. And I had a thing on that I really haven't done since then. I had a thing on generations, which it's a different bit now, but the punchline has stayed the same. So, my bit about where I say that essentially it lands with Gen Zers are like millennials that forgot to take their Adderall. I set that up and delivered it a different way, but that punchline and that essential joke is still something that I use a lot. So a couple that are still with me. It's kind of cool. Yeah.
So knowing you today, you still kind of keeping those themes of like those topics as well.
I know,
like
I do. I don't know what
alcoholism and those darn younger generations.
I know. It's teaching and drinking are my biggest teaching, being married and drinking. If you eliminated that, I have zero material. Yeah.
So you mentioned in the beginning some comedians who you were big fans of growing up that have, I think, very big and distinct personalities. When you went on stage, did you consciously try to kind of model yourself after a specific person, or were you just kind of doing your own thing? How did you feel you were? What do you feel like your stage personality was supposed to be, I guess?
Wow, that's a great question. I tried to not do that because I knew people did that. Yeah. Right? I knew people kind of...
I did that. So, I know.
Inherited other people until they got their own thing. Mm-hmm. But then looking back, like, you look at the first year I did comedy, and I've got the mic cord slung over my shoulder, and I'm pacing like...
all over the stage.
And I realized later I was aping Chris Rock. I know he doesn't sleep.
You two are so much alike.
Yeah, why not, right? We're skinny and it ends there, right?
Plus, you use the N-word a lot.
All the time. Not on stage, because that would be classless.
Yeah.
But I realized that because I love Chris Rock, and I realized that, dang it, I was imitating somebody because I was going back and forth, kind of like he does, and I always kind of, that's like that about him because it was kind of a rule breaker. Like, you're not, necessarily supposed to be doing laps around the stage.
I think that's actually good for early comedians because I feel like we're both teachers. So we know that there's a whole thing with when you're teaching, you try not to just stay in one spot either. You try not to, I had one, actually when I was in the Marine Corps, they called it Fort Podium, where you just stand behind the podium the entire time.
I feel that, yeah.
And so I think a lot of comedians probably do that on stage as well, where they just kind of stand by the microphone stand, or they don't even take the mic off. So the fact that you were comfortable enough to actually move around. I still don't move around that much. Like, I maybe take a few steps, but it's one of those things where, like, what do I do with my hands? Because one of them's got a microphone. Do I, hold it with both hands? Do I hold the mic stand? What am I doing? And so being able to at least feel comfortable enough to move around on stage, I think that's good.
I think it was actually nervous energy.
I mean, if you channel it in a positive way, it's better than...
And I do pace when I teach.
Visibly
so it wasn't all Chris Rock.
Yeah.
I guess if I would have said, like, you haven't been out drinking, then it would have been a problem. But,
people would have called you out real quick, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Like, why are you doing that?
That's right.
So Don was there. Chris knew the host, knew you were going to be going up. Was there anyone else that you brought out?
We had some acquaintances in the audience.
You kind of built up relationships, I guess, with people through following Don.
Yeah, we didn't know they were going to be there. I think I probably knew a couple of the comics, and she knew a lot more of them, of course. And then there were some people that we knew from, like, Cross Keys Winery, just acquaintances from being out with friends and stuff like that. But and I remember there was a drunk lady that said,
I think I was there that night.
Yeah, she said,
really familiar.
She said, "Take it off, Dad."
Oh my God! To you?
And I actually,
it wasn't your daughter, was it?
No, I actually said something that at least I remember as being pretty clever. So it was kind of like my first crowd work, I guess. I didn't remember that really till now, but
I was so nervous. That was one of the things I was worried about. Is someone going to shout out something that's going to throw off my set? Because I tried to be very scripted with what I went on stage with. Yeah. And you sound like you were a lot more free flowing, or at least you were able to roll it, maybe the hype or something.
Probably. If you would have told me someone would have yelled something out before I went up, I would have been like, okay, tonight is canceled. See you next month.
On there.
So it worked, but it was not due to any, like, excessive comfort on my part. I assure you that.
What made you stick with it?
I came home because it worked out so well, right? Because it worked out so well. I came home, and I know you know this feeling, just 5 feet off the ground. I remember we were home. I am not a night person, but it's midnight and I'm still juiced up and, like, talking to Dawn a mile a minute. And she's sort of, like, smiling and nodding, like, yes, I know.
It's like a proud parent.
Yeah, I know.
It's like you're a kid at a recital and you just nailed the solo.
Yeah. I thought it was a bucket list item, and then but by then Dawn was producing shows for X2 Comedy, and she asked me. I think the way she put it was a few days later. It was 1 or 2 days later, and I was out for a run, and she stopped me, and she had this kind of stern look on her face. I was like, "Oh shit, what do I do now?" And then, she said, "Hey," but what she was doing, she was thinking about her lineup, and she said, "If you do that exact set, would you be willing to go up?" And she made it very clear, you are not to deviate one word from what you did, and she was smart that way, because she knew I shouldn't kind of get all experimental. My first, it wasn't, it's a paid show in that it was a pro show. Yeah. I did not get paid, but other people.
I was going to say, she's like, I get paid.
Yeah, exactly.
You live off me.
Exactly. But so she put me on. That went well. She kept putting me on, and I think I've been on every X2 show since.
Nepotism.
Honestly, yeah. I mean, that helped. I don't think that I would be doing comedy if she wasn't doing what she did.
You didn't have that infrastructure kind of in place.
Right.
I mean, this isn't the area where you kind of start off and think this is where my career is going to take off. So I mean, I would say that's more of a benefit than a criticism, if anything, because, like,
of course,
that you have that resource where you can, someone can help support you. And that's one of the things I think X2 now, Funny Womacks and Friends, has been pretty good about doing, is helping people in this area to kind of, or get into, I guess, a more professional setting and be able to get more recognition and esteem for their craft.
That is something I very much admire about her, because she's very intentional about that. She'll run a lineup by me, and I'm like, that's great, and all those people are great, but that's a heck of a lot of comics. Yeah. And she's like, hey, I'm trying to give so-and-so an opportunity. They hadn't been up. at a paid show in a while, and she will actually think about that, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, that's always good, and it's good to have that support. I think that's one of the things that's growing in this area is kind of the community of support.
Yeah,
more people have been getting involved, and more people are kind of driving the distance to each other's shows and stuff, or even open mics. And I think that's helping to keep things alive.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to do that to keep it alive.
Yeah.
Right?
What was your biggest takeaway from that set? Because I mean, you got your first gig kind of right off the bat. Well, not right off the bat from that, but soon after that, and you had to stick with the same set. But like, what was it that you what was a lesson that you learned that you could apply to future ventures?
I think it just gave me some confidence that I could do that. Now, at that same time, I was not thinking that I would ever do it, but I was like, hey, okay, so cool. I've done a 5-minute set. That's really cool. As somebody who just loves comedy so much, huge comedy fan, that's really cool that I did it and I made people laugh. And I know what it's like to make people laugh, and just the feeling of knowing what it's like to make people laugh in a show, not having a beer with my buddies. But, in a show is such a good feeling. That's why we all do it, right? We get hooked on that. And then we keep coming back for more, inexplicably sometimes. No, but just to know that, hey man, I can do that. And so that's why that I was excited when Dawn asked me more than nervous.
Did you go back to those other open mics and be more vocal about your criticism now that you actually had some stage time? You're like, I've been on stage, and let me tell you how.
Oh, Lord, no.
Let me tell you what you're doing wrong.
Oh, man, you know that this is a humbling thing, and the more you do it, the more you're like, hey, who? Yeah. I mean,
that is one
so
of the
much
things.
Less critical now. I used to watch Netflix specials or Amazon Prime specials, and if I didn't know the comic, and I'd be like, "Oh, we'll give this guy a chance," and we'd be 5 minutes in, and I'd just be like, "Nah, this guy's a peasant," And now I'm like, "Hey, man, that guy
probably
is crushing it enough to have a special, right?"
Yeah.
I mean, like that guy's running circles around me, so it's made me more humble about that.
That's good. That was always one of the things that I got weirded out about. This didn't happen at my first mic, but I have had, I remember 2 distinct occasions where someone gave me unsolicited advice, and that just really rubbed me the wrong way. Because, I have like a very dark sense of humor.
Yeah.
So like I did a set, and it was one of my early open mics. Like this maybe my 3rd or 4th time doing it. And I got off stage, and people laughed at my set. Like, they liked it. There were the kind of groans because I do dark stuff, and it was still early on. But it was overall a good set. And then a guy came up to me and was like, hey, that was funny, but you should, lay off the dark stuff. And I was just like, well, they laughed, so. And then I walked away. And then he went on stage, and he was not good. So that's the other thing, too, because that happened twice where, someone who gave me unsolicited advice, and they themselves did not do well. And I'm like, who are you to give me advice?
Absolutely. I like advice from other comics, but I haven't
when
had
you
that
ask
solicited. Yeah, exactly. Like, what do you think about that? Would this be a good punchline, or would this be a good punchline? But I'm usually asking someone I trust, and it's like not some hi, my name is, I just met you.
Yeah.
We're at an open mic.
That's always
you could be a complete disaster, and how does that person know who you are as a performer?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like you're just your stuff. That's Travis Valle comedy, man.
Yeah, exactly. That's my whole. That's my brand, I guess you could say. Yeah. I will say that I do have thoughts probably like what you had, where I'll hear someone going and I'll be like, "That's not good," or "There's something there, but they need to do better." And I won't offer it unsolicited. If I know someone, and I think that's one of the benefits of kind of building this community is we'll kind of give each other advice sometimes. Yeah. Usually it's solicited because they'll be like, hey, what did you think about that?
Yeah.
And then I'll give them my honest feedback. But I try not to do that unprompted because, again, it's one of those things where they probably don't want to hear it. Or I think actually Nathan Carlson, another big comedian kind of in this area, he said something. Well, he was quoting someone else, so this is fourth-hand information. But it was I can't tell you how to do jokes the way you do jokes. I can only tell you how to do jokes the way I do jokes.
Yes. And see, there's the irony. If Nathan Carlson gave me a tip, I would freaking write it down and type it out. I mean, that guy's awesome.
I asked him for advice on a joke that I felt was kind of in his style, and he said that's basically what he told me back. And he's like, I can tell you some stuff, but it's not going to be. It may not help you because you and I are different people, which is something good to kind of bear in mind too. I think
I did have a comic that. I won't say who.
Okay.
And after a paid show, and I had a good set, and it was more of a showcase. Mm-hmm. So in as much as there was a headliner, I guess I was it, and then
gotcha.
Then I went last.
Everyone had roughly the same amount of time though.
I had more time. I did like 20. That was actually my longest stretch. Right. And this person, and it was very nice. This was not negative. I loved this comic. But they were like, my gosh, that was the best I've ever seen you do. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, yeah, you only see me at open mics when I'm trying crap out. And there's 5 people in the audience. Yeah. Of course, that was the best you've seen me do. You know what I mean? Well, that's the thing, too. Like this is a tight, prepared set, and people know they're at the show, and et cetera, et cetera. That was kind of funny.
Yeah, that's something I kind of with actually. Kind of Dawn's mention, I try to start introducing into when I host comedy open mics, like, hey, this isn't necessarily representative of their top work. A lot of them are trying out new stuff, so don't judge them off this set tonight. But I do have those moments where I feel like I'm being judged off this set tonight, so you do feel that pressure of like, you want to bring it, but also you need to try out new stuff because one of the new things might be gold that you can put onto a showcase, but it's going to go through some growing pains, I guess, or some speed bumps before it actually hits the mark that it needs to.
Yeah. I've been there a million times where I know intellectually that it's an open mic. You're there to practice, and meanwhile, it's like, it sucked.
Just destroys that confidence that was built up a second ago. Yeah. All right. What advice would you give to comedians who want to start off doing stand-up comedy?
One, just what we talked about. Don't let a tepid response, especially at an open mic, discourage you. Yeah. Even though I never take this advice, don't get too high or too low based on the last thing, but I do that all the time.
You judge yourself based on the most recent reaction.
Yeah.
You're only as good as your last joke, kind of thing.
Yeah. Here's something. Just do what you need to do to get better for where you want to go. Mm-hmm. I just recently started enjoying comedy more again. I was on this up and down ride. And because I think I went through this little season of looking at, let's say you mentioned Nathan. What a great example. Okay, so Nathan goes up, kills all the time. He's so good. I'm pretty sure if we showed up at a open mic tomorrow in Mount Airy, North Carolina, he will be there. He's just
the man with the band.
He's everywhere. He's in Richmond. He's in Charlottesville. He's here. And he just grinds. And
that's a lot of it too, isn't it?
Exactly. And I've looked at him and comics like him and been like, well, crap, I don't want to do that. I guess I'm not cut out for it. It's like, well, who says you got to be him? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing wrong. Okay, Nathan he's funnier than me and he's working harder than me. So there's no secret the fact that he's a better comic than me.
He's put more years in, even though you've been doing comedy the same amount of time. He's got more stage time.
Yeah,
and that's gonna.
He's been doing it longer.
That's like with Heather Joyce too, another talented comedian. She shows up randomly all over Virginia.
Yeah, those grinders, I respect them so much,
and they're moving forward.
And I love comedy, but I don't love it that much.
Yeah, I get you.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't, at least at the moment. Mm-hmm. And a few months ago, and I think it was some conversations with Dawn and just some reflection, prayer, meditation, everything, that I was just kind of like, well, who says I got to treat this so all or nothing? Either I'm not doing anything or I'm, a road warrior.
That's the pressure I've been feeling lately too.
Yeah.
It's like, is the reason because sometimes you feel stagnant, and I was like, is that because I'm not going out? But I've also got a wife and a newborn kid, and I've got a life outside of comedy that, you know,
Of course. And
you
me
gotta
too.
prioritize.
Yeah.
I'm not 18 and trying to drive up to New York and get at the Apollo or nothing. So.
And there's that, right? There's that reality. And also last summer, you know, because I wasn't working for a lot of summer, you know, because, you know, teaching, same as you. And so we just decided, hey, we're going to get better. So we were driving to Roanoke for an open mic. We were going up to, you know, Northern Virginia for open mics. And we were, you know, every Monday at the Southern, we're going to open mic. And we're going to all of yours. And we were just like, hey, man, you know, so it's like, for us, we're getting up a lot. And anytime you increase the time you get up, you get better. Shocker, right? And I could feel it.
Yeah.
And the semester started in the fall. And it's like the reality, like, do I want to get home at midnight for the Southern and then teach my morning class? Well,
exactly.
Oh, and by the way, try to work out and do all the stuff I like to do in life. And I'm like, no, I don't. And then I finally gave myself permission to sort of balance comedy the way I balance everything else in life. And maybe that makes me not everything I could be, but it's just going to have to be enough. You know
it's good for your life. So.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So that's my long-winded
no, that's
to
good.
a comic. Figure out what you want to be and do what is good for you and what your next step is. And don't worry so much about what everyone else is doing.
Thank you, Chris, for taking this time to talk with me.
My pleasure, man.
Anything else you want to add in the last second? Plug in.
Yeah, follow us at funnywomacks.com. If this comes out before July 27th, that's going to be our third annual Cape Comedy Fest. We're bringing in headliner Lachlan Patterson from LA. It's going to be an amazing show. It's going to be at Melrose Caverns.
In a cave.
In a cave. You have
last
performed
year.
in there. Yes. Great time, right?
Oh, yeah. Great show.
Yeah.
And I think, are they doing the cave tour? Comes along with the ticket?
Yes.
There you go.
I don't know if it comes along with a ticket or not. I think we have different pricing again this year.
I get you.
If I'm not mistaken.
Go to the website and find out.
Yeah, go to the website and find out. This is my wife's department. Go to thefunnywomacks.com to check us out. And also on Instagram and on Facebook. If you DM us, you'll really be DMing my wife because I have zero social media interaction.
Staying off the grid.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, man.
Yep. All right. Have a good night.